Hello and welcome back to another update where I cover the latest developments throughout the front line in the Russo-Ukrainian war. We start out in the south in the direction of Sjeverne, where the Russians have launched an attack from the village of Sjeverne in the direction of Sjeverne, flanking the Ukrainian positions in the southern parts of the village and pushing in the northern direction towards Sjeverne from the east as well. This has allowed the Russians to gain control over the western parts, the empty fields here to the west of Vuhledar, and will likely continue pushing through the village itself as they consolidate their gains near Sjeverne. The Russians have likely gained full control over Sjeverne by pushing the Ukrainians out towards the fortifications to the north of the village and have used that as an opportunity to push towards Vuhledar to get rid of the bottleneck the Russians have faced from assaulting the village from the south, and will likely see Russian progress in Vuhledar in the coming days as Russians will combine the efforts of Sjeverne and Vuhledar towards only Vuhledar to push out to the northern parts, after which they would have gained control or regained control over the fortification north of the villages, allowing for them to have a stronger defensive position here in the Vremetsky ledge area. This Russian advance was confirmed with this geolocated footage here to the west of Vuhledar. Moving on to the next section of the front line, we see here west of Avdiivka, the Russians have advanced and captured half of Sokil, and we see that with this crazy footage here. And I say crazy footage because what we really see is quite the mad assault by the Russians. There's an armored personnel carriers with both soldiers on top and inside of it. This armored personnel carrier drives straight into Sokil, where it fights with a Ukrainian Bradley infantry fighting vehicle, gets hit a bunch of times but keeps driving. The Bradley also continues onwards. The armored personnel carriers then goes on to drop one of the infantry who just falls off and continues to crawl away following that fall, and then the rest enter some buildings in the central parts of Sokil. With this, the Russians have successfully gained a foothold within Sokil with this crazy assault that just faced off directly head-on with an Bradley infantry fighting vehicle. This assault took place with multiple Russian units and heavy artillery prior to the assault, after which the infantry fighting vehicle found out that an assault was coming with the drone footage showing that they were tracking this armored personnel carrier before it started to enter Sokil, after which the Bradley infantry fighting vehicle moved on for the next assault units, and this armored personnel carrier simply drove through the first defensive units, after which it is reported, according to this footage, that the Bradley and another armored personnel carrier infantry fighting vehicle was destroyed here near Sokil, and the Ukrainian soldiers abandoned the vehicle and moved into the forest area. Based on that, we can see that the infantry fighting vehicle won't simply turn around and then go back to attack the Russian soldiers, but instead that the Russian soldiers bought the time they needed with that assault to occupy the few houses and have indeed gained positions here on the eastern parts of Sokil. With this, the situation has changed in the area, and the Russians will likely launch further assaults here to the north, gain control over the fortified positions there, and continue assaults through Sokil in the central and northern parts of the village to gain full control of it before moving further westwards towards Vuhledar and Yevhenivka. This was actually a very difficult position for the Russians to attack through. They had to go through multiple layers of fortifications, after which Sokil is connected to Vuhledar and Yevhenivka, which means that the Ukrainians wanted to prevent the Russians from gaining a foothold, because with a foothold, the Russians can now move through the residential areas of all of these three villages as they are well connected. Gaining control over all of these areas would allow the Russians to then move on to flank Novopokrovsk to the south and Novoslivka Persha further south. With that, the Russians can use the main road from Vuhledar and down south, and directly from Solovyovo through to Novopokrovsk, and directly from Sokil towards Novopokrovsk, allowing for assaults from the north. Combine that with assaults from the east from the direction of Beredishin and Semenivka, and directly towards Novoslivka Persha from the east, and from the southern direction of Umansk. The Russians have now significantly improve their situation. If they continue to push through and capture these three villages here by Sokil, they'll be able to push towards Novoslivka Persha and gain control over yet another Ukrainian defensive line and push them all the way through to the Vuhledar river line. Moving further north in the direction of Chasiv Yar, or the micro-district. These reckless Russian assaults do not stop in Sokil, but continue here in the north, where the Russians have pushed through not just the central parts of the Chasiv Yar micro-district, but also the northern parts. Starting out in the central parts, we see this video here of Russian soldiers moving through from one building to another, running through the street, which is completely ruined, and an armored personnel carrier just simply stuck in a hole from an artillery shell, and they move in to clear the next building. They move into looking and taking positions by the door as they push through. The building is naturally completely in ruins from all of the artillery shells that have been happening in that part of the front, and then they cleared it bit by bit, slowly moving through, and additional soldiers come following the first assault. So we see that Russian soldiers have gained positions here in the central parts of the micro-district in the northern section, following their first assaults in the southern section, and they move through to gain control over further of these high-rise apartment complexes. Further north, there's also this video here blowing up one of the garages here in the northern parts of the micro-district of Chasiv Yar, and in this we see that the Russians have improved their positions in the northern parts based on this footage. We see that the Russians have pushed through the northern, central, and southern parts of the micro-district of Chasiv Yar as they resume with these street fighting through the micro-district and attempt to capture it to gain full control of it. Through this, we see that the Russians are looking to gain full control over the area from Kalinia to the north and the forest patches to the south as they continue assaults in the southern flank as well. They're looking to gain control over the western parts and gaining a foothold across through the forest patch and into the eastern parts of Chasiv Yar, just across the canal. The Russians have already fought through the northern crossing where they have attempted to gain a foothold across. I've had no updates since the video showing Russian soldiers with their presence in the trenches in the northern parts. But fighting continues both within Kalinia and in the western parts. So we see that the Russians are fighting all across the canal line from Kalinia and down south to the southern flank. Next up, it is the Ukrainians on the offensive, as they have started a counterattack in the direction of Ljuboke, where they managed to reach the outskirts of the town. This likely is a path through the Dacia area from the south here, from Lipsy upwards through the Dacia area and into Ljuboke. Based on the footage here, we see that a Ukrainian infantry fighting vehicle drives up to the outskirts of Ljuboke and starts spraying all around everywhere on the Russian positions. From the smoke inside of Ljuboke, we see that a heavy artillery preparation took place, and with the close proximity to the infantry fighting vehicle and the smoke rising, it is likely that the Russians are also launching counter battery strikes where they're hitting the Ukrainian advancing soldiers. And at the same time, we also see that there are some bullets that reflect from the first buildings, which shows that the Russian soldiers are present in the outskirts of Ljuboke, and the Ukrainians have not yet gained a foothold at the time of this footage. And this is the geolocated footage confirming the position of the infantry fighting vehicle. So based on this, we see that the Ukrainians likely recaptured the entirety of the Dacia area and are pushing towards Ljuboke itself, but have yet to gain a foothold on the outskirts of it with the help of this infantry fighting vehicle assaulting directly head-on the Russian positions by Ljuboke. In conclusion from today's video, we see that the Russians continue their offensive operations in the south and the east, where they still remain with the initiative and are continuously pushing through, launching new assaults and improving their positions across the front, while in the north the Ukrainians are pushing hard through Lipsy in the north towards Ljuboke, and in the east, in the direction of Vovchansk, there's also positional fighting there, where the Ukrainians are attempting to regain positions following the Russian assaults and offensive here in the north, which allowed them to gain the footholds both here by Ljuboke and Vovchansk. And that is going to be all for this update. Thank you all for watching. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and check out my Patreon for additional content. Thank you all for watching and have a great day.